Hi, Scott. It's really nice to be with you and your team and all of your customers today. It's been a long 14 months, so I thought I would start with a personal question. How have you and your family weathered these last 14 months?
Well, it's great to see you again, Suzanne. Thanks for doing this with us, and thanks to all of our customers that are out there. I will look forward to seeing you back in the friendly skies and earning your business. The one huge silver lining for me during the pandemic has actually been the time with family, and I have loved. I'm still here at home, looking forward to being back in the office too. But having breakfast with the kids every morning, having dinner every night, taking the boys to school in the morning. I came into the pandemic 14 months ago with 6 kids, and I now have 7. So one of the other silver linings, one of the great benefits was baby Scarlett was born, and she's now 2 months old. So
Congratulations.
time with family has been
Awesome.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that part has been great going through the crisis.
And how about your United family? How do you feel like they weathered this storm?
I'm so proud of what all the people of United did, and what a difference a year makes. A year ago, I rarely have sleepless nights, but having sleepless nights, worried about what it would mean for our people, particularly if we didn't get the first tranche of government assistance, which really gave us a bridge to get through the crisis. Because a year ago we were burning $100 million a day, and it wasn't clear when the pandemic would end. We thought it could take a long time. At that kind of rate, without some kind of bridge from the government, it was going to mean essentially shutting the airline down, and then hoping you could bring it back up when the crisis was over. And so it was really scary for our people, and it was hard on our people going through. But what I'm proud of is really everything they've done and all kinds of leadership at United, whether it's financial, safety, health. But perhaps what I'm most proud of is the really we were trying to change the customer experience, trying to get all of us focused on doing the right thing for customers. And our goal at the start of the year was our NPS scores to be at 2.5 points. They were up 30 points last year, and then another record in the first quarter of this year. And we also made some big changes, getting rid of change fees as an example for customers. But as much as anything, those are about changing the culture to empower our employees. And there's a whole bunch, if we want to talk about that more, of things that we've done that employees. The last time I had the whole Denver team, leadership team here last night, and one of the things they said to me was, what employees say, like we've got the connection savers, we're holding flights for connecting customers, and just like all these various things. And they're like, you really mean it when you say this. And that's what we had to do to get them to do the right thing for the customers. We couldn't put them in positions where, if you've spent your whole career slamming doors on customers to, 10 minutes before the flight, and that's the wrong thing to do, it's hard for you to believe that the company wants you to do the right thing for customers. And so the ability to prove to employees that doing the right thing for the customer is important, I think is the most enduring change that will come out of this crisis.
Walking the walk is harder than it sounds. And I think, having been on the other side of some of those closed doors, I think it's really wonderful to hear you talk about that. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, the other thing I've heard you talk about, and I think your reputation preceded you before you got to your CEO role, is that you're a huge fan of data. So,
Yeah.
what did data or the lack of it, how did that help you and your team make decisions at every step of the way during the last 14 months?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I am a big fan of data and a broad use of data, and taking a broad perspective. But what I'd tell you is, in this crisis, that's not the way we made decisions, because we'd never experienced something like this before. And I think these are the kinds of places where an over reliance on data is mostly about what has happened in the past and how does it reflect what's going to happen in the future. And we were unique at United. If you went back March 10th, there was a big airline conference, and everyone else basically said this is not that big a deal. And at United, we said, well, this is going to be a really big deal, and we'd already started taking action. And we didn't have data to prove that, but we had pretty good evidence when we saw it show up in Italy, and as an example. And throughout the crisis, we've focused on trying to forecast the future, but it hasn't really been about data. Another big one is we've fought. I remember when we had the conversations about a year ago, it was in April of last year, with the whole kind of executive team. Is business travel going to ever come back? And is international demand? And we thought it would take longer to come back once the crisis was over. But we're convinced that human nature means that those things are going to come back. And so our competitors in the U.S., our two big airlines, are retiring 250 to 300 airplanes each. And that, at the end of today, America, Delta and American combined have almost the same number of wide bodies as United does. And we're not using them all today, but we're confident that when borders reopen, all of that is going to come back. And so by taking a bigger picture and thinking about what is really going to drive these, because we didn't have data to support it, I think we made better decisions than people who, what I've said to our employees is some of our competitors underestimated the severity of the crisis at the start, and so didn't take aggressive enough action. But then when they saw it fall off a cliff, they overestimated the long-term impacts. And because we kind of had a vision of where we thought things were going to go, it gave us confidence to be aggressive early, but to reserve all of our aircraft and our employees and be ready for the rebound.
Is there anything you do if you had it to do over again that you would do over again with you and your team?
Well, hindsight's 2020, so there certainly can
Of
be
course.
specific areas where you go and say tactically, X, Y, Z would have happened. But I feel like, feel really proud of what we did. And another way of looking at this is we came into this crisis with the biggest exposure to COVID, the largest international
Mm.
network, the largest business airline in the country. And yet, if you look at the financial results for the last 4 quarters, even compared to low-cost carriers, we're kind of number one or number two in the industry, and that's despite this huge exposure, which really is what has all of me and all of us so excited about the future. Because I do think business demand is coming back. I do think international is coming back, and those things are in the deep freeze still. But when they're out of the deep freeze and come roaring back, like domestic leisure has come roaring back, we already start, near at or near the front of the pack, and we're just going to be able to vault to the lead. And we look at this as, I already think we've become the global leader in aviation. I recognize everyone doesn't agree with that yet, but I think a year from now, 2 years from now, people are going to look back and say, this is the moment where United became the number one airline in the world, the airline that customers want to fly, and really vaulted to the lead.
I mean, that's heartening. I hope you're right. I think there's so much signs that things are coming back. In fact, the New York Times has recently declared that suddenly everyone wants to fly. So
Yeah.
how are you seeing that in your business in terms of the way that you measure success, and where do you see the signs that travel is coming back?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of great anecdotes. But the simple way that I think about it for our business is our airline is roughly 1/3 domestic leisure travel, short haul, that includes Caribbean and Mexico, 1/3 domestic business travel, 1/3 long haul international. That domestic leisure, where you're allowed to do it now, is more than 100%. People getting out. I don't know how people are finding rooms in Florida. As many people are flying to Florida. I don't know what the hotels are. But that shows the desire for people to connect and reunite today. Business travel is still down 80%. And just like I'm sitting here at home in Dallas and not in the office tower in Chicago, until people are back in office tower, I don't think that really starts. And our best guess is that and certainly at United, this is going to be true, but I think by and large, by the time we get into the fall and kids are back in school, and so people have now had time to get their arrangements done and get their kids back in school, people will start to be back in office towers, and business demand will start to tick up. I don't think it'll be a huge volume of business. I hope I'm wrong. Hope it's better, but in the back half of the year, but it'll start growing, and it'll start also to get people incented and realizing the importance of it. I've been traveling for business again and realize how much even more I miss connecting with people, and I think that will start to happen, and that will give people time to convince their CFOs to let them put money in the budget for travel beginning in January. So I think the real takeoff in business demand, my guess, and it's just a guess, is going to be in January, because it'll go through those two cycles. And then for long haul international demand, that is going to come roaring back as soon as the borders open. I mean, you know, you can now go to Iceland, Greece, and Croatia if you've been vaccinated, and we added new flights, and we took over 3,000 bookings in the first few hours. People have a huge desire to go, and the Kirby family is going to one of those destinations this year. By the way, we're looking forward to it. My wife is
Very
choosing
cool.
which one at the moment, but huge demand, and that's just a question of when the borders open. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed. By the time this is displayed, perhaps we'll be there. That we can get the US UK to open up, and if we get that done, then I suspect the EU will not be too far behind, and we can get going across. Hopefully, some this summer, but if not, it is coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, our own research at GBTA is showing we do a monthly COVID-19 poll of our members, and it's been tracking upward every month. We had some dips early on in the year, and now our April survey results show that there is a 6-point improvement, which is about a 10% improvement of those companies that are already opening up non-essential travel. So that is a big jump compared to what we had been seeing.
Yeah.
And we also see that when people go back to offices, which they're telling us will be around September, that is when non-essential travel will become more normal again. So I don't think the floodgates will open up, like you say, immediately, but the budgets are being set at that point anyway for the fiscal years of that fall of calendar year. And I think there's really something there. What will you and your teams be doing will there be some goodness coming out of the pandemic that you will continue to, you talked about change fees, continuing to keep those away. What will you be keeping in terms of the things that you're doing for customers even after the pandemic?
Well, really, I do think that the biggest cultural change, most important change for us coming out of this is a real pivot to focusing on trying to win our customers' business. For far too long at airlines, it was about schedule and price. We've got the only nonstop flight, so we're, and we knew it before, but flying, airplanes with 3 people on board made it impossible for anyone that was on those airplanes flying for United to take the customer for granted. And it put it in stark contrast. These are the people that are paying for us to be in the skies. And so focusing on all the positive things that have happened to the customer experience, and expanding on them. Getting rid of change fees was important to our customers, but it was also important to our employees. Empowering employees to hold airplanes to wait for connecting customers. Like that's not just a benefit for the connecting customers. That's an example of, now we have the people who really believe, for the first time in their careers, I work for a company that when they tell me to do the right thing for a customer, actually means it and let me do it. And so, like, I hear more and more of these kind of little stories that are happening. Lots of hard product investments that are coming on Polaris, lounges, and all those things. But frankly, those things are going to be easy to do, and we're going to do them. And our customers, particularly the customers that are listening here, they're going to love those. But I'm more focused on the human element, the human interaction. I'll give you one simple example of something that we're going to, I expect, continue to do permanently. And that this will sound so minor to you, perhaps, but when you get on a United airplane, still today, the flight attendants hand each customer, a little moist towelette that you can use to wipe down your seat. And a lot of our competitors did that, and they've stopped because it costs money to do. The reason we're going to keep doing it is not just about the safety or health issues, it's comfort for customers, but it's much more about the human interaction. I mean, I've stood and watched when I've flown, and the flight attendants love it. They want us to keep doing it because it gives them a chance to make eye contact with the customer, to say hello, to greet them, and you can just see people's faces change, with that simple little interaction. But finding those little things that we can do, empowering, making the employees feel empowered to do the right thing for customers, I think is the biggest thing that customers are going to, it may be subtle, but it's going to change how people feel flying United. Because our goal is to give all of our customers no reason to choose one of our competitors. If we're going to have the same schedule, we're going to have the same price. There's no reason to choose one of the competitors, whether it's the hard product or the soft product. Because really, we should be in a position to be the world's #1 airline, and we're committed to doing that. And that will only work if people want to fly United.
Culture is the hardest thing to change as a leader. So coming into this role, was this part of your vision of what you planned all along? Did the pandemic change your point of view along
Yeah.
the way? I guess where do you as a leader step in and say, this is the hardest, but I'm going to tackle the hardest part first?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I thought it was the most important thing that a leader has to do before, and it was something I was going to focus on. But the pandemic really crystallized for me what that means. And to me, leadership is about inspiration and vision. Management is about compliance. And the reality is, most people are managers. Tell me the rules, I'll enforce it, measure the rules. Leadership is about inspiring people with the vision of where we're going. Because if I have people that are proud, who are excited, coming to work, we have 100,000 people that believe in the company, believe that we stand for something more than just being an airline, and they're proud that then when situations happen, they're not reading from a playbook of how to deal with it. They want to do the right thing because they don't want anyone to think badly of or to feel badly about United Airlines, because they're proud of it and they take it as a personal insult. And so changing that feeling, and I said to the board at the end of the year in my write-up that I have to do for the board, that I'm convinced that my job is two things. Number one, and most importantly, is make our employees proud. And number two is get our customers to like us. We're an airline, so I started with like. I aspire to have it become love, but I'm willing to get to like first. And that's really my own, it's pretty simple actually when you boil it down to that.
That's so well said. I think you talked about doing the right thing, and if employees who wear your brand every day know that you're doing the right thing for them, they do the right thing for us as customers. I certainly been on a lot of United planes, and I have seen your employees at work. I think you have some of the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing that culture change when I'm on board as
Thank
well.
you.
Other areas you've been doing, let's focus a bit on doing the right thing. And I think Planet Earth has been part of what we just passed Earth Day. So where does Planet Earth fall into your list of priorities for United Airlines?
So sustainability, particularly climate change, is a personal passion of mine, something that I have been engaged in, following and interested in since I was in college in the 80s. And it is the um, defining issue for our generation to solve. And there are some truly catastrophic and essentially irreversible consequences if we don't address and solve climate change. And it may seem strange for an airline CEO to say that, but I believe it. The 7 kids that I talked about, I want to leave a better world for them and their children and their children. And so we have to address it. And at United, we are we are the global leader in aviation. We're one of the leading global companies on taking real steps for climate change. And when I emphasize the point real, um, what we're doing at United, there's 3 big pillars. The first one is sustainable aviation fuels. The reality is as we're flying airplanes, you can't use batteries or hydrogen to fly big airplanes long distances. The energy density simply isn't higher. The amount of batteries or hydrogen you need weighs more than the whole airplane. And so we're going to continue to burn fuel. So we've got to develop sustainable aviation fuels. We have been investing in sustainable aviation fuel companies for a while. We're advocating on Capitol Hill for R&D credits and support for sustainable fuels, because this can be a lot like wind and solar. Wind and solar power 20 or 30 years ago, for those of us that have followed this, were uneconomic. People said you can never compete with a coal plant or nat gas power plant. Today, they're cheaper. In most parts of the country, it's cheaper to produce a megawatt. And that's because There was support from the government. We drove down the cost curve, built economies of scale. We can do the same with sustainable fuels. Second is focusing on research and development. And, we're excited with our partnership and investment in Archer Aviation, eVTOL aircraft. And while they're not going to replace our big long haul airplanes, they can do a lot for short haul, smaller markets, air taxis, and just getting research dollars into the space. Who knows what we can come up with down the road. But it's important to launch those kinds of products and see where we can go with them. And so that's the second one. And the third one is around carbon sequestration. And this is the one that I think it's most important for people to really understand, because it's not just about airlines. It's about almost all companies. And what carbon sequestration is taking carbon directly out of the atmosphere and pumping it underground and permanently storing it for tens of millions of years underground. That is so important, because if you just go through the math, and I would recommend Bill Gates' book to anyone that wants to read it. He talks about sequestration as well, but he goes through the math. We cannot get to zero without sequestration, and so we're going to have to do it. And far too often, almost all companies, are using carbon offsets. And carbon offsets, started as a nice idea, but the reality is most of them are scams. They're not real. They're not actually projects they're not doing anything that wasn't already happening anyway. And even the few that are real, they're just too small. Mankind produces 4,000 times as many emissions today as we did in the pre-industrial era. There is not enough room on the planet to plant 4,000 times as many trees. And as long as every company is looking at it as a marketing exercise, check the box and say, I did my part because I wrote a $3 million check to someone for a carbon offset, the planet is never going to solve the problem. And we have to accept that the solutions are harder than that. It's not as easy as writing one check a year and checking the box. And that's why that third pillar for United is important in sequestration, because it's bigger than United. It's important for everyone to get off the offset bandwagon and actually focus on real efforts that will make a real difference. And sequestration is one of the biggest ones. You can probably tell I'm passionate about it.
I can tell you're passionate about it, and you're teaching me good things, because I need to be aware as we deal with this issue across the board. And I think from a buyer perspective, a corporate buyer, or whether it's other suppliers in our association, and it's what we bring in terms of education to members who need to know about this as thought leadership, and bring that back to their companies. Where is the role that corporate buyers can play in this? You've started EcoSkies. Is there something within the corporate buying community that could help give confidence to government policymakers or to others who need to make those kinds of investments?
Well, first, what I'd say on this is United is by far the leader, but I don't want us to be the leader. I'm spending a lot of time talking to every CEO I can, and particularly internationally. A lot of them are listening, and trying to convince them to do the same thing, so that we're all doing it. This should be like safety, where we're not competing on our climate change goals, but we're all trying to solve the problem and make things better. So I hope that that's the case. What I would say to this group is, one, United has the EcoSkies Alliance, where your companies can contribute to purchasing sustainable aviation fuel. By the way, what we're going to do with those dollars is reinvest them into the R&D, the infrastructure, new startup companies that are trying to build more, so that we can scale up the size of the sustainable aviation fuel. So that's one very tactical area that you can do, and you can have confidence that that's real. It's not like the traditional offset programs. But the other thing I do is ask people to get educated. Dig into the problems, dig into what these things really are. If somebody says this offset program is real, dig into it, ask details, and see if it's really real. I'll tell you one quick story. I yesterday read an article in the Wall Street Journal about a new offset program in the southeastern United States, where they're going to pay timber farmers, so people that grow farm trees for a living, to not cut down the trees for 1 year. By the way, they're going to cut them down a year later anyway. But what's interesting about it, in the same Wall Street Journal, 2 to 3 weeks ago, there was an article about the fact that timber prices are at all-time lows because in the southeast, because they closed a bunch of mills during coronavirus, and the mills can't process its timber. So, like all these timber farmers saying, we're just trying to hang on, and we're gonna not, we can't afford to harvest the trees this year. We're gonna hang on and hope the prices are higher next year or the year after. Well, now there's this program where companies are taking credit for carbon credit for trees that were not going to be cut down anyway, and they're going to be cut down anyway next year. And that's the point. These carbon offset programs aren't changing anything. Like absolutely nothing changed, except companies are marketing themselves as offsetting their carbons. And that's the risk. And so my request to everyone is educate yourself. Don't just, if it's a simple answer, it's probably wrong because this is a big, hairy, complicated problem. It's solvable. We know how to do it. But it's not simple. And if you've got a simple answer, it's probably not real.
I think that's we didn't get here immediately, and it won't go away immediately.
Yeah.
I think we made the problem bigger faster than we would have
Yeah.
needed to if we would have addressed this 10 or 20 years ago. So now we do have some emergency rationality. And I have to apologize for all the noise here in New York City. There's always an emergency every minute here. So
Yeah.
the planet
It's good
has
that people
an
are out and
emergency.
doing stuff.
Exactly. We need to address the planet's emergency. And I think I'm also heartened to hear you say that it's not a zero-sum game, that there is a way for not competing programs, but for parallel programs to make a difference in concert with each other, right?
And the more we work together, the better.
Yeah, indeed. So that's certainly part of our mission. I know, as our GBTA association, is to bring sustainability to the table in a way that we haven't been doing. I think in a critical way. The break in the pandemic has certainly given us, and I've looked to the leadership, such as your pronouncements and your commitments and the other things that you're driving, to make sure that we are keeping up with the pace of what industry is telling us that we need to do on the education front. Of course, one I've heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the most efficient aircraft out there today is the Boeing 737 MAX. So, A, is that true? And B, with the safety issues, safety took a back seat for public health for a while. Where is United in your current fleet in terms of Boeing 737 MAXs? And was there a recent setback of any concern to you as you continue to put them forward?
Well, both the Max and, in fairness, the 321, the 320 Neo family are much more fuel efficient, and that's good. But that's evolutionary change, and we've been doing evolutionary change as an industry for 100 years because it saves money to burn less fuel. So we will continue to do those things. We should do those things, but we also need revolutionary change, which is not just get engines a little bit more efficient each and every year, but also do things like sustainable fuels to start changing what actually goes into the airplanes, even when they are more efficient. As for the Max, obviously it's a wonderful, completely safe airplane. We're glad to have it back. This most recent issue is a relatively straightforward issue. We know how to fix it. Just kind of going through the process with Boeing, the FAA, and sort of finishing all the formal process. I expect by the end of the month that those airplanes will be back up and flying.
That's good to know, because I know I'll be on one of them soon, so that's good to know. Certainly, I represent a large group of business travelers and the companies that support them with their budgets. I'd love your perspective as a leader of this industry on what does this industry, certainly with aviation, hospitality, and others, what does the industry itself need to do to keep business travelers healthy, productive, and keep businesses growing in a way that keeps the sustainability goals as part of what those goals are. But is there a set of building blocks that you think business travel industry needs to adhere to get this industry back going again?
Yeah. Well, first thing that I would say is that all of us on this call who are part of travel, business travel, all kinds of travel, should be proud of the role that we're playing in what I will call the psychological recovery of the world. as we get vaccinated, as we feel safe to travel again, and as it is safe to get back out and start living your life, whether it's traveling or going to your local restaurant. There's this huge pent-up demand, and you know, like I thought this was going to happen. I've experienced it myself. My wife and I took our first trip away together since the pandemic started a week ago. And you talk to other people. We talked to other people at the resort we were at, and like it is a huge psychological win for people who've been on lockdown, who've missed the company of others, to get back out and travel. And as hard as this has been on our industry, and it's been hard, we made it through, and we're prepared to be a part of really making people feel good as we get back to travel. And everyone on this call should be proud of that. I certainly am, the role that we are playing. I do think that the safety health protocols that we put in place are going to be important. One, it's great that I think that people now know more about, particularly on an airplane, the changes that what we know now about the airflow on airplanes and how much safer it makes it. Some of the changes, like at airports are going to get upgraded to higher grade air filters. That's already been happening. We're going to have a much more rigorous cleaning protocol on aircraft, from here to forever. I think that heightened awareness is going to be with all of us for the rest of our lives, and is going to change not just what happens in travel, but change kind of across the board where we go. But I also, I've followed the science really closely as we've gone through this, and feel really confident that as we get through vaccinations of more and more people in the country, that it's going to be safe. It's not going to be zero risk, but I expect we're going to get down to something that looks like the flu in terms of the impact that it has on people, and that's encouraging because it's a way to get our lives back and get back to connecting with people in the United States.
One of the things that we're advocating, especially for international cross-border travel, is to help governments decide together on how to eliminate quarantines and what kinds of documentation is needed to let a traveler who either has been vaccinated negative or where are you in thinking about what are those steps that might help
Yeah,
us to get
yeah.
business travelers going across borders
Yeah.
again?
Well, from your lips to God's ears, that is really important that we be able to reopen borders, particularly with vaccinations. I think testing could be done. We're spending an awful lot of time. I've got a few calls tomorrow with some governments around the world, trying advocating for that. And there's a lot of support. I've described this as we've been on the 1 yard line on this point of trying to use vaccinations as a way to open borders without quarantine. We've been on the 1 yard line for about a month or two. We need to push it into the end zone and get someone to just do it. And so a big country to just do it. I am cautiously optimistic that the US, UK will find a way to do it. We have similar rates of vaccination, similar rates of cases, lots of obviously huge historic ties. And so we're kind of focused there. And if we could do that, it would be really a good benchmark, a good something that could be followed in other countries. The other thing I would say at United, we've anticipated that some combination of vaccines or tests were probably going to be required around the world. And so last summer we started working on what's called the Travel Ready Center, where you can take pictures and upload your documents. And we've actually been training artificial intelligence. So you can take a picture of your vaccine card or your test results, depending on what it is, and we can give you a green check mark that you pass the requirements for Iceland. And if you don't, we can let you know that you haven't met all their, because it probably is going to be different requirements in different parts of the world. And that's unique. And look, we started working on it a year ago, so we're ready for it. But I hope that that can be something that really makes the travel experience easier for customers, because if there is a different rules at different parts of the world, this vaccine, that vaccine, this test, that test, we'll be able to have it in an automated fashion instead of consumers trying to figure out a Byzantine set of rules on their own. So we've really focused on trying to build a architecture for technology that makes it easy for customers to understand and know what to do.
Yeah, we trust you with all of our data already, so we'd love for
Yeah.
you to take care of this for us
Yeah.
as well as we're getting on the road.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much in building the comfort level of a business traveler will come from early leisure trips that they take. And so
Yeah.
there is this continuum of from leisure travel to
Yeah.
business travel and that comfort
Yeah.
of the business traveler. I know we're on our last few minutes, so I wanted to end with a personal question again. And I haven't heard you talk about this, so maybe this is the one question that maybe I can surprise you with today. Um, what is the first flight or air trip that you remember taking, and how did it impress you enough that you became an aviation leader in this big, sexy industry?
Yeah. So I absolutely know the first trip that I took on an airplane. I decided that I wanted to be a pilot when I was in eighth or ninth grade. I was a World War II history buff, had read every book in my local library on World War II, and World War II was won by air power in both the in Europe and in the Pacific Theater. And so I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy and got appointed and accepted to the Air Force Academy. But my family air travel was a lot more expensive back then. My parents had 6 kids that couldn't afford to buy airline tickets, and so the first flight was from DFW to Colorado Springs to go to the Air Force Academy. I got my head
Oh,
shaved the day before I got on the airplane, so that they didn't have to do it to me when I got there. And I landed and got off and was super excited. Made sure I got to sit in the window and see the mountains of Colorado as you're coming in. And I got off and I walked downstairs, and the upper class cadre were waiting for me to put me on a bus. And like a dozen guys started screaming at me and like, why aren't you standing at attention? Your introduction to the Air Force Academy. It was all great, but I'll never forget my first flight because my first flight was going to a place where my whole goal was to become a pilot.
that is a 360 view of really what it takes, I think, to become a CEO of a major airline today. So um, you're probably a lot younger than I am. I think my first flight was still back in a smoking section when I was not a smoker at all, and I think I was in the last seat on a plane going from the Midwest to Washington D.C. And I still remember that flight like it was
That's
yesterday. It was
good.
such an impressive.
It's amazing, isn't
Uh,
it? It's what makes our industry great. As tough as the year that we've all collectively been through. Now that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's memorable. The experiences you ask most people the first flight, they can remember it. And there's not many industries where you can say that.
No, or where you'd look back fondly on something like that and want to reminisce about it. So, thank you so much for your time today, Scott. I wish you and your team, your family, all the best, your customers this week at your event. And I look forward to seeing you soon at one of our GBTA events as well.
Thank you, Suzanne. I look forward to seeing you soon in person. And to all our customers here today, thank you for your business. Welcome back to the Friendly Skies. We look forward to seeing you. And I look forward to seeing as many of you in person as it is possible to do. It is so much better than doing events online to actually get out and see people in person. So thank you for your business and welcome back.